Okay. Well, not too many people really understand exactly what's going on with the laser, but it has to do with a man named Fritz Alfred Popp, who's a German biophysicist, and he discovered that cells actually emit low-frequency, coherent light. And I want to start kind of with a little background to make some sense. So my slogan of the day is that science proceeds slowly, one funeral at a time. And the notion that most of us live in is still based in Newtonian physics, the idea that we live in a mechanical universe. So we think of ourselves as mechanical beings. Our heart's like a pump, our brain's like a computer. We can replace parts like a hip joint, for example, and indeed we can. But that's a very old way of thinking. Then we kind of moved into a chemical model based in Louis Pasteur, the pasteurization guy, and he declared the war on germs, the germ theory of disease, and we got to kill the germs. So out of that, the whole pharmaceutical industry started happening, and we created this idea that chemistry was the answer to everything. So, drugs are the mainstream treatment in medicine these days. Then eventually we got sophisticated enough to look at the electrical model. And now we have EKGs to measure the heart, and EEGs to measure the brain, and EMGs to measure the muscles. And we have treatments with electrical devices. In fact, back in the 1920s and 30s, there were thousands of medical doctors who actually treated with electromedicine, but that eventually got suppressed by the drug companies, and we went back to that chemical model. So now we've become sophisticated enough to start looking at something called biophotonics. The idea that photons, not electricity, actually runs the system, and that these weak photonic emissions, which are coherent light, and I should talk a little bit about that. Coherent light is what a laser has. It's a monochromatic, a single wavelength of light, and it's completely coherent. So when you shine a regular light, over time it dissipates, or as it goes out it dissipates, whereas a laser stays with a single beam into infinity. So it's coherent. That's the light that our cells are emitting all the time, and they communicate. In fact, there's now theories that we're communicating on a biophotonic level between us. The idea of intuition, of attraction, of dislike, of love at first sight is all about fields, electrical and biophotonic fields, and how they connect. So that's a quick background. What the laser is doing is turning these mechanisms back on. And another concept I'd offer here is called regulation medicine. So most of medicine is about fixing symptoms, suppressing symptoms, repairing what was broken, not regulating the system. And probably in 20 years you'll start hearing wide use of the word regulation medicine. Lasers regulate the system. They turn back on mechanisms that have been suppressed or turned off. So a healing mechanism gets suppressed in Rachel's nose, for example, because the trauma, basically she goes, and she freezes there. So the whole healing mechanism gets thwarted or inhibited because of the trauma. So the laser is able to turn the regulation back on, and now instead of being stuck in that frozen moment of the trauma, both psychologically and emotionally and pain-wise, but also at these deeper healing mechanisms, the process turns back on again and accelerates.
Now we're looking at